Well, I'm going to go ahead and get a quick discussion started, only because we have been dealing with this ourselves quite a bit here recently. And it's going to be talking about the topic for today that Hussain will be talking about is going to be virtual assistants. Lifeonaire actually does employ virtual assistants, and I had attempted to use virtual assistants in the past, many years ago when they were first just becoming a thing. I jumped on that bandwagon and started using them, and admittedly back then I did not have very good success with it. And one of the challenges in the very beginning was that there weren't a whole lot of virtual assistants. They were a lot more expensive, and at that time you were hiring a virtual assistant and you were doing all of the training, you were teaching them what it was you wanted them to do, and very few of the virtual assistants brought many skill sets to the table that were things that we could actually use. And so we stopped using it. We found it to be easier to just hire employees and actually have them in our office where we could talk with them face to face and help them through those things. As time has passed, the virtual assistant industry has just grown and grown, and many people are available to work as virtual assistants today, and their skill sets are very diverse. One of the reasons why their skill sets are something that's worth really looking into today is because they have done a particular job for other people and have developed experience in working for others. One of the things that I have really been encouraging, whether it's my students or even within Lifeonaire, is to hire multiple virtual assistants rather than just one. There's always the thought and the idea that, hey, I want to hire one person who can be sort of a jack of all trades and who can handle all of this stuff for me. But the reality of the situation is most virtual assistants are not really good at doing everything. They're not capable of being your go-to person for all of your needs, but instead, what you want are virtual assistants who are people that are specialists in certain areas. So for instance, we have a virtual assistant right now who is going to be focused just on lead generation. And their goal is going to be to do that through social media engagement. They know a whole lot more about social media than I do. They know a whole lot about marketing and engaging people and developing a base of followers and subscribers through social media. The interesting thing about it is, they come, I can sit here and I can hire a company within the United States, and we have talked to some people here in the US about doing it for us, and they wanted $7,500 a month to do our social media campaigning for us. When we reached out and hired a virtual assistant, we found somebody who has maybe as much experience, maybe a little more than the people we talked to here stateside. And the people who I hired are doing it for $6 an hour versus $7,500 a month. And it was very interesting that the plan that they had given to us on the state side that was $7,500 a month was almost identical to the plan for the person who will do it for $6 an hour. And there's a few things that I want to just talk about with that. There are some people who have this purist attitude and mentality that, hey, I don't want to sit here and give jobs outside of the US. I can relate to that. There's times when I feel like I would prefer to just keep the jobs closer to home and to employ people here in our own country. But when somebody wants to charge me $7,500 a month to give me the same thing that I can get for less than $1,000 a month from somebody else, I have a hard time reconciling that. I also feel like that sometimes if you are one of the people who wrestles with, hey, I don't want to make that kind of commitment, I'm worried about taking on the expense or spending money on something. One of the things that I always ask my students to do is reframe it, and it's not an expense that we are doing, but instead it is we have the ability to be able to bless somebody else with the work. And so when you can begin to look at it from that perspective, that, hey, I'm not taking on the expense of this. Instead, I have been given the ability to now be able to bless somebody else and to give somebody else meaningful work. And in return for that, I'm going to get something out of it as well. It really changes the way that you begin to look at bringing people on board to help you. So whether it's an employee or a virtual assistant, I want to just encourage you to think of it that you get the opportunity to actually help and bless someone else through this. So I see that Hussain is actually joining us here right now. Hussain, are you in?
I am. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, and I can see you. So welcome.
Oh, thank you. I apologize for being late. I somehow had this in my calendar as noon Central Time, and it was Eastern Time, so I messed that up.
Don't sweat. You need a virtual assistant to keep you straight.
Yes, ironically, I've never been late to work, and I also showed up an hour late to work today. It's just a whole day for me, but I'm glad everybody's here. I tuned on when you were just chatting about, having overseas help, and then also you're talking about, the idea of delegating work to other people. Did you hit on anything else before I came on?
No, but I want to let you do it. But before I do, I just want to take a moment just to sort of introduce you to everybody. And I am grateful that you are here and willing to share with us. Everyone, Hussain is somebody who I met when I was living in Wisconsin. He was also in Baraboo, Wisconsin, and we had started a little RIA there in town. Hussain just has an incredible heart for helping people. And I actually got to meet his mother as well. His mother came to a Lifeonaire event, and she was so grateful how it had changed her life and her son's life. And she was just gushing over how her son and the life that he's living, and she was just so proud of him. But he is just an awesome, incredible guy who really decided to go down this path of using virtual assistants, and did an incredible job with it. He wanted to just share and have the opportunity to be able to share with the community what it has done for him, how he did it, and to maybe answer some of your questions with it. So Hussain, did you want to do any screen sharing, or are you how do you want to do it? I'm just going to turn it over to you at this point.
Perfect. Well, thank you for the introduction. I'm definitely glad to be here. I'm excited to be on the call to share with everybody. But I do have a PowerPoint, and I noticed that screen sharing was disabled.
You're a co-host right now.
All right, perfect. All right, let's see. All right, can you guys see my PowerPoint?
I got it, yep.
All right, well, awesome. Well, first of all, thanks everybody for hanging out and chatting here with me. So like Steve said, I'm going to be talking about virtual assistants, and it's something that prior to joining Lifeonaire, I worked full-time as a pharmacist, and then I had some part-time pharmacist jobs. For a while, I had like a DJ business, and then I had some rentals I was building. So I actually built this out of like necessity and started using them because I was just really busy and wanted help with some stuff. And now I'm a lot less busy, but I still have a lot of the same stuff in place. So I know there's people within Lifeonaire that also use VAs, maybe some that have been using them longer than I have. So I have some stuff that I wanted to share that I've learned that I'm pretty excited about. So, but if anybody has things they want to chime in on, definitely, throw your hand up or say something. So, there's some particular parts that I have good experience with and other parts that I don't. So, yeah, if you have questions, interrupt me, let me know. But yeah, I just wanted to sort of share what I've used them for and how they've been helpful. So as far as what I wanted to go over, I just had three main points I wanted to hit on: why you would need a VA, how I've used them particularly in my business, and then also some tips that I have learned over the years about using them. So As far as what a virtual assistant is, this is a pretty cookie cutter definition. So a virtual assistant is just an independent contractor who does administration services, usually operating outside the client's office. So, in there, independent contractor is important. So usually a VA will work with more than one person. So, they usually have multiple clients, and then usually they're exclusively working remotely, and that's operating outside the client's office. And not always, but at least with me and the people that I know who use VAs, usually they're not working full-time for somebody. Usually it's like a part-time basis that they're working. And, of course, and I know a couple of people in Lifeonaire who have multiple VAs who work for them full-time, but generally speaking, it's usually they're working for you just, here or there. So as far as why to hire a VA, I have 2 points up here. So a lot of people will agree that there's different dollar per hour tasks in their business. Some of them are very important tasks, and some of them are, tasks that have a lower dollar per hour rate. So if you Google the 80-20 rule, this really illustrates this principle. And I won't spend too much time on it, but essentially the 80-20 rule just says that if you look at the output of any project or business, 80% of what you produce comes from about 20% of, a particular type of work. So if you're looking at how much money you made in your business or how much time you spent on it, whatever your metric is, if you really dial down, you'll notice that most of what you get from it came from a small part. So if you can figure out what that 20% is, and you just spent more time doing that, you would have better business results. And how you get more time is you delegate that other stuff that's not important, or maybe less important, I'll say that, over to somebody else, like a virtual assistant or an employee. So definitely Google the 80-20 rule if you've never heard of it. I didn't quite do justice to it, but and the other point, and this one was tough for me to wrap my head around, is the VAs that you can get are narrowed in on a very particular task that they do. So usually you can find somebody who can do something better than you can, which is sort of odd to believe. But even if you don't believe they can do it better than you can, even if you believe that somebody else can do it, let's say 80% as good as you can get 2 VAs, and now you're working at 160% of what your potential is. So VAs are scalable. So that's another good reason to hire them. So if you're convinced that you want to hire a VA, I love this exercise, and it's called the Post-it note exercise. I stole this from somebody in Lifeonaire. I can't remember exactly who I stole this from, but essentially, let's say you decide you want to hire a VA, you would literally take just Post-it notes, and you'd find something in your business, and it could be one particular task. Let's say it's buying a property, and you would essentially just do a flow chart of everything you had to do in that process. So if you want to find a property to buy, first, you might have to do market research to figure out what market you want to invest in, maybe what type of asset class, and then you got to get a mailing list together, and then you got to scrub your mailing list to make sure it's right. You got to do the actual mailers. You got to answer some phone calls of interested buyers. You have to make offers. You have to visit the property. You have to do contingency closing stuff, and maybe put some work together. And so that's might be the process of going from wanting to invest to I have a property under contract and sold. So if that was your thing, you'd write a bunch of Post-it notes, and you then underneath them you'd write any details in there. So after you write down every single task you have in your business, then the next exercise would be to put a dollar per hour amount by each one. And because some things are going to be things like figuring out, go to census.gov and do market research. Somewhere in there, it could be my lawyer or a site survey needs to go out and do something for, $80 an hour or $200 an hour. So you put the different dollar amounts by each other. Then the next thing you do is, this is very individualized. Some things are just a pain in the butt, for lack of a better word. So some things are just if they feel really heavy and you realize you really don't like picking up the phone, or you hate working with spreadsheets, or whatever it is, you just put is this annoying for me, yes or no, next to it. And then for number 5, the last thing you would do is you would write if it's something that can be done remotely. So you would write R for remote. And later in the presentation, I'll hit on this, but you can really think out of the box once you start thinking about what you physically actually have to be present to do. So you write that. And then the last step is just looking through everything and being all right, what are the lowest dollar an hour tasks that are the biggest pain in the butt that can be done remotely. And those are the things that I would consider, hiring a VA for. But so that's sort of the thought process of how you would go through and maybe figure out what particular task to do. And, again, I started with just something real simple, and over time have used VAs for a bunch of things, but that's sort of how you can narrow down possibly what a VA could do in your business. So as far as what a VA can do, they can really do anything. I have some examples here of some things that either I've used VAs for or I have had friends use VAs for. So, they could do market research, they could do things with spreadsheets, they can create logos, they can do your bookkeeping. I know that's a big one everybody hates. So answer phone calls, make phone calls. Those are pretty low dollar an hour things, but they can do things as complicated as helping somebody, with a business plan. You can find VAs who have, doctorate degrees, law degrees, and, they can help you with more complicated things than just like the normal office work. Just keep in mind, they can really do anything. And, when you go to look for a VA, you'll find that it'll be across the board. Some people are charging $3 an hour. Some people are charging, $103 an hour. But those are a couple things that, keep coming up over and over as far as what I see people use VAs for. So I have 4 examples of how I'd use VAs, and I'll talk about each one. So this first example is the very first time I ever used a VA. So I was getting ready to mail a big property list, and it was a list that I already had. And what I wanted to do was I wanted to go through that list and update addresses, because it was about 3 or 4 months that I bought the list. So I wanted to update addresses in case people moved. And then the list that I bought, for one reason or another, for this particular county, all the big list websites didn't include the number of units, but I knew that was available on my city assessor website. So I could look up each property, figure out who the owner was, update it on my spreadsheet, and then go and grab the number of units on there, because I was targeting, I think, 4 units at the time. And anyway, so I had, it was maybe 2000, once to go through it in my head. I thought about this idea, or I would go through, let's say, maybe I would do it for an hour here and do like 30 here, and maybe 50 here or 100 here. And I figured in my head I can get it done in about 2 weeks. And I just, thought I'd give this VA thing a try, and went to a website. Somebody, put an ad out there. Somebody says, yep, I can do that. I hired this person. I went to bed. I woke up, and they did everything. Like literally while I was sleeping, I woke up, and it was, $30 or something for them to do the whole thing. And that was a big eye opener for me, because, what I would have did is like waited about 2 weeks. It would have taken about 2 weeks for me to get started, if I did it. And if I'm comparing this to somebody else who might be out there doing the same thing, now I have a 2-week head start for, a pretty low cost. That was just a pretty basic example, but I think it's fun because it's the very first time I used it, and I realized the power of having other people help you with stuff. Mm-hmm. So I have one of the things I use my VA for pretty regularly is I have rental vacancies, and for my units. And again, this is something that sort of came out of necessity, because I was working my jobs and I didn't really have a lot of time to, deal with the whole screening process and, application screening process and all the questions people would ask me. So I was first doing this for myself. I later turned this into a business where I did this for other landlords. But essentially what I have my VA do in this sense is when I post an ad up for rent, for property, it goes on Craigslist, Facebook, Zillow, a bunch of websites. And, everybody, if you have rentals, I'm sure you're familiar with just a list of like, is this still available? You put the minimum criteria in there and people still ask you questions. You say no pets and people are like, can I have 8 dogs? So what I was using my VA for is they had access to a Facebook, Zillow, email, and they would go through and answer those questions. They'd pre-screen applicants to make sure they met the minimum qualifications for me. They would go through, they would set up different showing times with people. And then they would, once applications actually came in, they would get on the phone, they would call the previous landlords for me, get all the references in order for employment verification. They would do that. They'd call employers, make sure people's positions are permanent and, everything's what they said on their application. And they would put it in a little pretty package for me once everything was done, and then I could make an objective decision with it. So again, this is another example of, I can screen things a lot quicker. I could do them a lot, more objectively. And again, if I can get my property rented a week sooner or 2 weeks sooner than it would if I did it, that's, vacancies cost money. I have a VA who does this for me at like $5.50 or so. And she's great on the phone. If let's say it takes her 10 hours to go through these applications, that's $50. In most markets, a week's worth of rent could be $250. So right there, I'm again doing things quicker and saving money, saving time. And this was something that I really like. But another example, I started a LED car lighting business a couple months ago. So logo design, this is another thing that you can go and find somebody to do, locally. You can find a graphic artist, but in a matter of a week, maybe, I just needed a logo, went to a website. They asked me a couple questions about my business. What type of business is it? What color scheme do you want? Filled out a little form. They designed a logo. We did a couple revisions, and with no effort at all, I got a logo that I liked. That's the example of the logo. And yeah, that was just another thing that was pretty effortless. And it was maybe, I don't know, 20 minutes of work on my part between going to a website, clicking a button, answering some questions, and then they gave me 3 examples of ones that they made. I said, I like this one the best, but I don't like that. 2 emails back and forth, and I got a logo, and I think it was about $30. And so example 4, this is something that I started pretty recently, about maybe 3-4 months ago. And when I was thinking about what I was saying, that, you can challenge what things you have to be physically present for. So I was getting annoyed that all my mail, I had paper mail going to a PO box, and I'd have to visit that PO box, and I have to take that mail and do stuff with it. Sometimes I had some tenants that were still sending me checks, and they were just stubborn tenants still sending me checks because they don't want to pay online. Sometimes it was just bills that need to be paid. So I just, either pay them or put them in a box to pay them later. Sometimes it was just things I just needed to scan in. Sometimes I needed to send things to tenants. So I ended up using a virtual mailbox service, and I played around with a couple of them. So if anybody I ended up eventually going with a local one, but I played around with some couple national ones. There's probably 20 or 30 people who do the service, but all my mail now goes to somebody else who receives it for me. And then my virtual assistant can go in, they can log in, and they can see all the mail that came in, and then they will act on some of the stuff or sort some of the things. So they'll save it to Google Drive folders for me. If it's a check that a tenant is paying me, they hit a button and it gets forwarded to my bank and gets deposited. If it's a bill, they'll scan it in, they'll add the bill to my calendar. And then I know that now I have to go in, and I'll have a reminder on my calendar of when I have to pay the bills. Let's say, a tenant is late on something, they can then send an outgoing letter from the US over to the person, through a service. So, this is all stuff that if you would have asked me a year ago, could somebody do this remotely? I probably would have said no, but with this service, it's been working pretty good for the last few months. It's been, sort of eye-opening. And again, a simple thing, maybe going to the PO box and, depositing checks on your phone is not a big deal for me. Again, for me, it was just a pain in the butt type of thing. So I do see a question in here about the mail service that I use. So the one I recommend is called ipostal.com. Right now I live in Wisconsin, and I found out that there was a community share space in my city that did a similar service, and I just wanted to support somebody local. And so I moved to a service that's specific to people in my area, but I was using something called ipostal.com. And then another question I see here is about how the VA sends a US letter. So there's a lot of services where literally you can go online and you upload something, you tell the address that you want it sent to, and then you hit a button, and then that company from the US will send that letter to wherever it needs to go. So for this, I use postal methods, postalmethods.com for this service. Again, there's so many competitors of these, so use whatever works for you. I mean, the reason I use Postal Methods is they also do bulk mailing, and I used it for something in my work, like my W-2 life, where I wanted to send a bunch of custom letters to thousands of people at the same time. So that's why I use Postal Methods. But some of these virtual mailbox services also let you send outgoing mail. But yeah, that was pretty cool. So you can certify things, you can do all types of stuff. So this is something that sounds simple, but I just hated going to the post office box, and this has simplified that for me. Tenants' checks get deposited faster because I would just wait till like the 5th of the month to go to the box, and then some people sent their check like a week before that. So now as they come in, everything just sort of gets done quicker. I designated a certain time every month where I pay, or twice a month where I pay all my bills. And it's just worked out well where the VA can just schedule it and be like, yeah, this is a bill you should pay on this day. And, again, a very simple thing, but something that has helped me, just have more time to do other things. So, those are a couple examples. So as far as finding a virtual assistant, you can hire them a couple different places. These are a couple common websites where you can hire VAs. Upwork and Fiverr are probably the two most common ones that people use. And I'll dive into those a little bit more, because those are the two that people always ask which one to use. I did write a note on the bottom. So what I'm doing is I'm hiring an individual person, and I'm hiring that individual person to help do work for me. You could also hire a company or a firm who then manages VAs. And then that way there's a person between you and them. Because as I go through some of the tips that I've noticed, it's almost like, you can work with the contractor directly, or you can, hire a general contractor or, property management company. So they're, depending on your personality, depending on how hands-off you want to be, there's benefits to either or. So, I'm trying to remember in, they're like for like phone and taking phone calls and doing real estate lead generation stuff. There's a really good firm, and I can't remember what they're called, but they're on the Bigger Pockets podcast at some point. But this, as I go through some of these tips, some of these things can be negated just by hiring a firm. So I have a lot of experience with the individual VA route and using these platforms. But if anybody else has used a firm or a company to, that employs VAs, definitely, I guess maybe throw something in the chat or something. I'd love to chat about that, or at least hear people's experiences using that.
We currently use Rocket Station for one of our VAs, but in that particular case, and I know of others who have used Rocket Station too, but that was when they were looking for like an executive type of assistant, somebody who would do more. So here's just, I'm not going to hijack the conversation or anything here. I want you to keep on, because this is where you get started. But I want everyone to know that I actually have a student who has a very large company who today, his operations manager is a virtual assistant in another country. And we're talking about a multi-million-dollar company. And what he's done is he has actually hired VAs who are doing a better job than anybody he's ever had here at running his company.
Yeah, that's awesome. I was just listening to a podcast called This Is How I Built This. This is a podcast of people talking about building their businesses. And there's an episode about Calendly, if anybody's heard of that company. And, again, the concept of having a virtual assistant do something. I mean, he had people essentially building his whole platform out, built this, I forgot the revenue of his company, but, something crazy. And again, these are just like, people who are not in the US who are helping him remotely, like build it, multi-million-dollar companies. So yeah, it's crazy to, see what the possibilities are.
Mm-hmm.
I do see John wrote, any tips on finding VA firms versus individuals? That's a good question. Again, I don't have to, I've definitely heard of.
Ask for recommendations.
Yeah, fair enough. If anybody has any recommendations they want to throw them in the chat about having a firm or a company, definitely throw them in the chat here. So once you, again, so a lot of what I'm going to be talking about is individual VA for things. So, when if you Google hiring a VA, if you just Google that thing, usually Upwork and Fiverr are the two big ones that come up. So I just wanted to chat about both of those really quick. So Fiverr is usually a company that's better for like one-off tasks. So if it's a one-time thing, you can go on and you can see a set price of exactly what it's gonna cost. So usually things like logo design, voiceovers, website design, spreadsheet stuff. I mean, you can find somebody that'll tell you exactly what it'll cost in there. It's sort of like a la carte service type setup. And in the lower right photo, you can see this is logo design. Oh, it's funny. The third one in is the person who designed my logo. It says like $20 underneath. It's like a mountain thing. It says like Summit, but you literally go on there. It says logo design, $20. You're just like, I want 2 revisions, this much money. I want the actual flowers of that. It's a set price. And it's like people who got reviews on doing the exact same thing over and over. So for a lot of those one-off things, Fiverr is a good place for that. As far as Upwork, and that's where I've had most of my ongoing tasks and the ongoing VAs who are helping me do things on Upwork. So one thing I like about it is it's more tailored to sort of more unique stuff as far as like, coming up with contracts or, knowing when people are doing the work and all that type of stuff. It has a lot of really good features for that. There's a picture that I have there, and it's essentially what they call a work diary. So when somebody clocks in for work, they can only clock in on the times that you agreed in your contract with them. That's also saved in Upwork. So in order to get paid, they have to go in there, clock in, and what you're seeing is a bunch of screenshots of their workstation. So essentially screenshotting a picture of their screen every 10 minutes. You can ensure that, they're doing what they say they're doing. So, again, there's a lot of different ways to do this, but Upworks just sort of makes a lot of that easier. And it's a good way to get started. I'll talk about this later, but a lot of strategies. People will find VAs on these sites. They'll test them out in this really structured platform. And if things are going well, they can just, move outside of this platform, because I think Upworks takes money from the VA. So if, if you're paying them $6 an hour, they only see a smaller amount. So if you're comfortable with somebody, you can definitely take them outside of this platform. But this is just sort of a good way to get started. So how much does a VA cost? Again, it depends. The VAs I've used have been, again, sort of doing those sort of like normal office assistant tasks, and they've sort of been on the lower side of things. So, $5 to $10 an hour. I had a friend use a VA to help him do a business plan, and like, I think it was like $200 an hour for him to, find a company to work on a business plan. He found somebody on Upwork who did a way better job for like $50 an hour. So I haven't used any of those higher end VAs to do stuff, but there's so many talented people out there that I would think big on what you can possibly do with them. So I wouldn't let sort of what I'm talking about, the presentation or things, persuade you from not, thinking big with stuff. I've heard people find lawyer and legal work on there, everything. It's sort of crazy. So these are 7 tips. I was, I sat down and I was really thinking about 7, like just tips of things that I've either seen, heard people talk about, or have read somewhere. And these are the things that I wanted to sort of share. So my first tip is sort of funny. This book, The 4-Hour Workweek, is a book that I've read a long time ago. So if you haven't read this book, I would either read it. If you have read it, I would reread it. So I actually reread it recently and was surprised about how many good principles about working remotely, about particular tips about VAs in general are in here. If you want the cliff notes and you don't want to read the whole book, in this version of the book, page 121 to 200, in there is where, he makes a justification for the VA. He has really particular tips for finding a VA. He talks about things about like cybersecurity and like you're giving somebody access to, different things and how all that's going to work. So really love that book. He goes into the 80-20 rule a lot, Parkinson's principle, how to set deadlines. There's like just so many good things in there related to this topic. So definitely check out that book. So number two, and again, a lot of these tips are going to seem pretty like basic, but like these are things that I can relate back to very particular times that I didn't do some of these and thought, whatever, I'll skip a step, and it's not worked out well for me. So number two is just document the entire process. So, before you think of what the VA is going to do, you're just writing the whole process start to finish, much like that flow chart with the Post-it note stuff, but in a document. And then after I do that, I like to highlight where what the VA is going to do, so they know what's happening before, they know what they're going to do, they know what's happening after, so they can get a good perspective of what's happening with the whole thing. So again, it's just tedious, it's nauseating in nauseating detail, but write up something like this. And this was something I did from a couple of years ago about when I was doing something with a leasing process for something.
So if I can, Hussain, I want to just encourage one other thing in regards to that. Like you said, it's tedious, it's nauseating. And in that regard, that will actually keep some people who are listening to this call from moving forward with doing this. And one of the things that we had on our podcast a little while back, a gentleman by the name of Joe Newton. And Joe is representing a whole process called systemology, and it's putting systems in place, and it's documenting your processes and your procedures. And Lifeonaire is currently working with Joe. We will have Joe helping us to document all of our systems, processes, and procedures. But what they have is a system for documenting your systems. And part of that system is you shouldn't be doing it because it is nauseating. You don't like it, and you'll probably not get it done. And that whole kind of thing. Now, some people can find it within themselves to go ahead and get it done. So I'm going to point out two things real quickly for anybody who is struggling with that. First of all, I want to encourage all of you, read the book Systemology. We have talked a whole lot throughout the years about traction and the EOSing systems. And, if you don't know what that is, don't sweat it. I'm not going to go into details with that right now. But one of the challenges that I've always had with the book Traction is that it's typically for a bigger business. And most everybody who's within the Lifeonaire community are smaller businesses. And they're doing a lot of the work themselves. And it's really difficult to go ahead and create this whole structure, this organizational structure with all the systems and processes, but systemology is for smaller. Now, here is the key point that I wanted to make with systemology, and to the point that you were just making, Hussain, is that systemology says get a systems champion. A systems champion is the person who is going to extract all of that from you. They're going to document the processes so that you have it. And here's the thing, you can hire a VA to do that for you. And so to have somebody on the outside who is actually interviewing you, talking to you, and extracting from you what the step-by-step process is so that you can now hire somebody to actually do the process is something that I highly recommend. And we had brought up Rocket Station earlier as a place where you can go to get VAs. Well, one of the services that Rocket Station provides before you bring that VA on board is that they will document your systems and processes. They charge you about $2,000 to do that. They will have VAs spending a week or so with you, just extracting everything from you, document all your processes and procedures so that when you bring a VA on board, everything's already in place. But for those of you who like the done for you, that could be an option to consider. So anyway, I'll leave that at that for right now. But everyone keep an eye out for Joe Newton as well, who's going to be getting more involved with the Lifeonaire community moving forward.
Awesome, thank you. So just again, that book you were recommending is called Systemology?
Systemology, yes.
Okay. I'm just gonna throw that in the chat. One thing I was gonna say, and it's not as robust as what you mentioned, Steve, is that one thing that I have did is once I write up my thing, I always ask the VA to because sometimes I'll write what I think people should do, and then the VA is like, oh yeah, I have 5 clients who also do something similar, and they'll make adjustments or changes to what I wrote there, and they'll help me with that. And then sometimes, if they're working and they'll be like, yeah, I know you want me to do X, Y, and Z, but I actually have been doing this. And then they'll update this document for me sometimes. But I really like what you were talking about, because that seems like a very robust way to do it up front. So then this is sort of along the same lines, but as far as giving directions, so, usually in any employer-employee relationship, if something isn't happening, it's easy to blame the employee, but usually it's the employer, the person not giving clear directions. So I like to make things in a video format, and hopefully this loads for me. So this is just a really, again, sort of yeah, maybe it's not loading. This is me. Oh yeah, this is a good load. Anyway, so I like to record my screen. So if I'm having somebody do something, and it is something that is going to be done on a computer, and I know how to do it, and sometimes I don't know how to do it, but usually I do know how to do it. I will literally put my computer there, hit screen record, and I will record myself physically doing the activity, just one round of it. So let's say in this example, I was going to our court website to generate a list of people I wanted to mail properties to, and all our eviction records were on a court website, but they don't make it that easy. Like, it's there, but you have to extract one at a time. So I wanted to do that, and I wanted it done monthly at a certain time. So I had, I recorded me going to the website, typing in the case, the court case for evictions, taking the relevant information, copying it back here, and I just recorded it. So this was like crystal clear directions. They can go watch this video a bunch of times, hosted it on YouTube, and that's what I was using to give people directions if I could. So again, if you want, the program I use is just called OBS. If you Google it, you can find a free screen recording thing. So I like to do that. I also like to have people, just sort of repeat back to me what I'm having them do. And again, these things would be applicable for like employees in general. And like, in my W-2 job, I, have employees hire and fire employees. So this is just something that is applicable across there. So another thing, again, these are like pretty simple things, but again, having a contract in place is important. Like I mentioned, if you're doing things through any of those bigger platforms like Upworks or Fiverr, all that contract stuff is in place in there already. You're not really making that up, but these are some of the questions that they're going to ask you, and they'll create the contract. Then, if you ever take a VA outside of one of those platforms, these are things that, you should consider. And these are pretty straightforward things, what working means, if you're going to pay them flat rate versus by the hour, when people can terminate the contract, all that type of stuff. But again, if you're using one of those major platforms, they're doing this for you. But when you're taking it outside of one of those platforms, this would be some stuff to consider. So then this is one, having a backup. So for people who've worked with VAs, especially if you're working with a offshore VA, so somebody who lives in another country, you can have reasons that people aren't showing up to work just in general, but usually things that have come up are internet outages, power outages. It can be common where, the power isn't going to work for 3 days. So if somebody's using his computer, then they can't show up to work for 3 days, or same thing with internet. So, a good question of when you're screening a VA, you're like, hey, what's your plan if the internet goes out? And, most VAs, or at least the good VAs, will have their internet provider and then like a mobile hotspot they can use. That will help that. If their power goes out, I mean, that's a whole nother thing. I know you can ask a VA if they have a backup. So some VAs themselves, they're not a firm, but they have a backup for themselves who could live in a different city. So that's something I've been able to ask people. Again, when you're hiring one of those big firms or companies, they're managing this for you. So in case if somebody doesn't show up, they're the people who has to worry about that. But still something, even if you're hiring an individual, just to make sure they're there. And sometimes the backup for a day-to-day might be you. I mean, I wouldn't suggest that, but if push comes to shove, and it could be you. And then, so as far as and then sometimes you have to straight up just fire a VA, or they just fall off the map completely. So retaining access to everything is important. So like I mentioned, I mean, this VA is on my Facebook, she's on my Zillow, email. So, you can create delegate accounts to most of those things, but, sometimes you cannot create a delegate account to things. So if you have to create a separate account, of course, I create these fake dummy accounts. So I always joke around that everybody through Lifeonaire, they'll see my name, Hussain Harun, on Facebook. And there's also another Facebook that has my face on it that's called Mike Harun. And like people are friends with both of them, but the one of them is just managed by my VA. Anytime something's posted there, the VA is there. Anytime somebody asks that person a question, the VA is a person who's logging in. But again, if that Facebook got compromised or that Facebook went away, it wouldn't be the end of the world. And again, the email that refers to is my email that it goes back to. So it's like hard to change the password or reset things without, my permission on there. Same thing with phone numbers. Again, when you're finding a VA and they're making outbound calls for you, make sure you own the number that they're using, make sure that number, you can see what's happening. Ring Central is a really good thing for that. It's a paid service, but you can create delegate accounts. You can record things. So you can spot check and see how some of the recording or how their conversations has been. Phone.com is another one that I use. It's like Ring Central, but just a little bit cheaper and has less robust features. But I felt like it was better for me. So, just making sure you own and retain access to everything, because on a moment's notice, you might have to find another VA to do that same task.
Have you had to do that yet?
What do you say?
Have you been in that position yet where you've had to go find another VA in a moment's notice?
Yeah, absolutely. So the VA that I probably went through 3 VAs who at least did work for me for 6 months or longer. And then one of them I had to fire, but the second time it was actually, they just stopped responding. They stopped doing everything. And I just didn't hear from them from about a week. So in that case, I first tried to reach out to them, then I had to start doing stuff. And again, this is something that I should work on now, but I just started filling in and doing what they were doing. And then, because I still had access to their phone, I can make the outbound calls. And then eventually I ended up just posting an ad for another VA. And it was nice because, I just quit their email account, made a new email account for the new VA. That VA actually got in contact with me. And when she got in contact with me again, it was she lived in the Philippines, and it was just a whole thing where the power went out, and then it was a slew of things. So it was that scenario. And I feel like I've heard that from other people who've used VAs as well. But the backup plan in that case was me doing it, which probably isn't the best thing, but it was nice that I still had access to everything to be able to pop in and do it.
I will just say that I have experienced that for the better part of the last month. VA that I work with they got hit with a typhoon, and she recently just got back to me and said, I'm now able to get to the internet cafe, which now has internet again. And so I will be getting back online with doing work. But she did contact me. She said, that it was difficult. She wasn't going to be able to do work for a little bit, and she would let me know as soon as she could again.
Yeah, it's interesting. My family is from Nigeria, and in Nigeria, rolling blackouts throughout the big cities is a pretty common thing, and it's not uncommon for a day or two for just the power doesn't work, or it's 10 minutes and it comes back on. It's just all over the board, where sometimes that can happen. So, but yeah. So the next part is, tip number 6 is about verifying work. So as far as verifying work, that's another thing where you have somebody you're paying to do stuff, and are they doing it or are they not doing it? Part of it is, again, clear directions of what you want them to do. One tip that I started using recently is if you're having somebody that's brand new work with you, or if you're having a brand new project, if you set an initial hour limit or percent of a project limit. So let's say you want them to go through 2,000 lists on, 2,000 examples on something, maybe have them go through 200 and then check in with you, and then you can see how they're doing and give them feedback earlier on. I always like to pretend to be the customer. So if I have somebody answering phones for me, I will call, or well, usually they know my voice because I've talked to them on the phone several times, but I'll have like a friend call and just pretend to just be a customer, sort of see what they do. I always like anything that's shareable. So, I like to spot check what people are doing. So like Google Sheets, Google Docs, and I mean, there's so many different platforms that let multiple people see the work that's being completed. So you can check in and always just sort of see things are how you want them to be. That work diary thing I mentioned that Upworks has, where you can see, what they're doing day to day. And then also hiring 2 VAs to do the same task is a clever thing to do as well. So sometimes literally hiring 2 people do the exact same task, and then, both have them check in with you at a certain time. And you can just sort of see, how 2 people are doing the work, how, are people doing it more efficiently than others. And that's a good way to sort of, check in and sort of see how things are going and make determinations on things one way or another. And then the last part is sort of taking it slow and being realistic. So, if you did that Post-it note exercise and you're like, man, there's like 20 things I want my VA to do, I would probably start with, one or like a cluster of stuff that's pretty similar, and then be realistic with stuff. You're hiring an employee, or well, they're not an employee, but you're hiring somebody to do something they may or may not be familiar with. I would sometimes, I know when I first started, I was posting properties, and like people would call up my VA who lived in the Philippines. They'd be like, yeah, there's property. I want to know if it's close to the library. And the VA, of course, has no idea if it's close to the library because she doesn't live here. And that was something that over time I was like, oh yeah, there's no way that she would know that. So I started including every property that got listed had a frequently asked questions. Here are the 3 things that it's close to. Here's the intersection. So when people are like, oh yeah, it's like, oh yeah, it's close to, the bookstore. It's 2 blocks down the street from the circus or whatever. So, and again, check in frequently. And again, it's an investment. You're investing in somebody. And if you invest in them and you keep in mind that most of the time, if people don't understand things, it's usually your fault as the person giving them the instructions. You can have a lot of, good results in the end. So yeah, that's all I had as far as the things I wanted to go through. I saw a couple questions come in the chat that I didn't look at, but while I'm reading through those, does anybody have questions that they wanted to throw out to me, or things they wanted to add that they've known have worked well for them in the past? I see somebody that says, can we get copies of the Google spreadsheet for screening? I will share anything you want me to. I'm not sure what you were referring to with that. Is Dan still on?
I don't know. Well, Hussain, I'll have a question for you. And
sure.
Hopefully we can get some clarification on some of those. But, I had brought up earlier that, hey, I have guys who are now using VAs as their executive, positions within their companies, to running multi-million-dollar companies. And we know that that's happening. But have you drawn a line like, I don't think I can get a VA to do this yet, or you've already experienced that you have been able to get VAs to do things that at one point you didn't think you could, and through using other online tools you're able to have them handle mail and stuff like that. But is there anything that you would say don't use a VA for?
Ooh, that is a good question. I'm like obsessed with like cybersecurity, and like I throw on like 2-factor authentication on all my stuff and have these crazy long passwords. So I've wanted my VA I wanted my VAs to do more stuff with like my financial information, but anything related to banking, I've strayed away from. I've wanted VAs to do, things related to like somebody just asked if a VA has did things with my personal life. I hate going through most of my emails, not all of them, but most of them, but I wanted a VA to get more attached into like my actual things. So I don't know, those are, I guess, some of the things, usually banking or things that, like if they got it and I couldn't get it back, I'd be nervous about. But yeah, I mean, I know that some of those firms that hire VAs have some really extensive like background checks that they do and like security with things. But yeah, I'd say like banking and stuff have sort of been my things. At first I was just, them representing my company was a little weird, or them, being able, like, I thought if they would see my rent checks, so they'd see what my rent checks are when I'm paying them, they'd feel weird about it. And, but I got over a lot of that stuff.
How about if you were going to do a startup, if you had a new idea, and I think, you've already been down this path where you've started new things, do you feel you could go out and find a VA who could do a lot of the legwork of getting your new company up and running? And I might elaborate more on my question, but how would you respond to that at this point?
Yeah, I definitely think if I was doing like a brand new business, I feel like a lot of the initial stuff I feel like is pretty like tedious, tedious things that I feel like a VA could definitely help with. So I would be comfortable using a VA right off the bat. I don't know if that answered your question.
Well, it did, and but I'll also expand upon that a little bit more as far as where I was going to go with it. Here's my point. We've had people who just recently were in the app asking, "Hey, does anybody have experience with Podio, or do you know where I can go?" VAs have been hired by so many people already here in the U.S. So I'm going to just focus on the real estate investing industry for right now. And since that's a large portion of who our audience is, are real estate investors, is that there are VAs who are available to work for you who have already done the work for another investor.
Yeah.
They know what works for somebody else, and they were hired to do a job. They did it one time. They may have worked for that person for 2 months, 6 months, a year, and they're available to work for you. And they already have experience. They know the ins and outs of somebody else's business, or how somebody else built the funnel, or how somebody else generated leads. And if you wanted to do, so this is where I was going to go with the startup, maybe you had a new website idea, something like that. There's a really good chance that if you had a new website idea and you said, I'm looking to get a website up and running, I'm looking for somebody with experience in generating leads and helping to put together a sales funnel and do all of this stuff for this specific thing, that there might be somebody out there who has already done that. And they have already done it for, maybe somebody who is out there that is successful doing what you want to do. And there's a really good chance that they hired VAs to do what they have done. And so my point is, don't hold back. I mean, you can go out there and be very specific about what it is you're looking for. You don't have to have the tasks specific. You need to know what the outcome is, and the VAs will already know what the tasks are. So just as a quick example, as I have a person who I'm working with now through Upwork, I've asked them, okay, I want to start building out our social media presence more, and I want to develop more followers and things like that. She said, okay, great. What would you like for me to do? I said, I would like you to tell me how to do it. And she said, okay. And so her first task was to put together what her full plan was and what the scope of work was going to look like. I didn't develop the scope of work. I made her develop the scope of work. And she came back with this long, detailed scope of work. And I'm going to do this, 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 and that. And these are going to be the steps that I take. And then I just reviewed it, contributed a couple of ideas, and said, it looks great, run with it. And then she said, okay, this is what I need from you. And in fact, I said, well, what do you need from me to now execute this? And she said, well, I need for you to give me access to this and access to this and access to that. And then I can go ahead and I'll fully execute it. So the beauty of it is, I have always felt like we need to train people. And I think there's a lot of VAs out there who are already trained and could train you.
Yeah, yeah, I would definitely echo that. That's a really good point. I love your approach to that. And even I remember when I first started doing the VA I use now, she was the person who introduced me to Ring Central because she used it with all her other clients. And she's like, yep, if you want a phone service, this is the one that everybody else uses. You should consider using this. And then at one point I was going to use a CRM and I never acted on it, but she knew, like, she had experiences with the CRMs that I've heard about and never used, but she was like, yeah, these are what everybody else is using. And I've did this work for other people before. I do see, so it's 12:06. I see some more questions in the chat. Steve, can I go through them, or
Sure.
do you want to end the call, or?
No, go ahead.
Okay, so I don't use any VAs in my personal life, but I want to start doing them. So, like, for example, that whole mail thing I was talking about, where the mail comes in, that's just in my business. But I was going to test that in my business, and I was going to use it in my personal life. So, I mean, you could use them for all types of stuff. And that, people I know use VAs to, respond to their emails and all types of stuff. I also see. Ooh, do you think you can use a VA to sell a business? I definitely think you could. I have no experience with it, but I bet you there are VAs who could do that. And I thought there was another question. Maybe that was it.
Well, there was a comment here that another VA overview said to have a VA do a single task. It's easier to replace and or train a replacement when they're only focused on one thing. And on a certain level, I very much agree with that as well, because you can get people who are experts at what they do. Don't take somebody who is good at generating leads and then have them do all of your research for you. They can probably do it, but let them stay focused on generating leads and let somebody else focus on doing the research. Now, the person who is currently working with me, our deal is you are going to be the person who handles all of this social media marketing. If I need any help, or if there's something that you are not an expert in, it's your job to go and hire that person to get that done. I'm not going to be the one who goes out there and finds that person. You know what you need to make your job easier. You will go into Upwork, find the new person who is going to do your job, help you with your job. But I'm not going to be the one to do that. And I asked them, are you comfortable with doing that? And they said that they've already had experience doing that in the past, but hiring virtual assistants and freelancers to do work with them, and that they would be more than happy to take that task on.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Man, I feel like what I'm hearing is like giving your VA like ownership of not only just like being your employee, but also being like part of the process of like being invested in, figuring things out. So they're not always like relying on you as the bottleneck or the funnel.
Exactly, because I am the bottleneck in most cases. And so having other people who can help there is a big, tremendous help when you can just get out of their way to let them do their job. So if I can, I just want to sort of summarize for everybody who is here with us on the call today. Get started out with one task. I mean, go set up an account at Upwork or Fiverr or something and hire somebody to do one task for you if you've never done it before. And it can be something simple. It can be anything from a logo. It can be for doing research. It can be for compiling a spreadsheet of different organizations for you. Whatever it might be, you will find that the job gets done, and the cost for you to get the job done was a whole lot cheaper than what you could have done it yourself. Probably will get done faster than what you would have done it yourself, and maybe even better than what you would have done it yourself. But when you get started with just taking those little steps, you start realizing I can delegate more, and I can delegate another task, and I can delegate another task. Soon you'll find that whether it's hiring somebody to work with you in your office and have an actual employee, or hiring more VAs to help get the job done, is going to be something that will help propel you to new levels of becoming more productive, becoming more profitable, more effective at what you need to do. And the beginning of Hussain's presentation was really awesome. It allows you to focus on the tasks that are going to be most profitable for you, the things that are going to get the most done, but delegating everything else out to VAs and allowing you to focus on one, living life is what's important to us in Lifeonaire, but two, effectively and profitably running your business so that you can live your life that way. So, any final questions?
I see some people wanted like copies of like the slides and some of the documents I referenced. I'm assuming everybody on this call would have access to the Lifeonaire app. Could I post these things in the app probably?
Absolutely. So,
Yeah.
and I would encourage anybody who has any other questions, please put them inside of the app. Hussain, I got to tell you, and at first I just want to thank you for being with us here today and doing this. I know that I guess it's sort of a rough day for you coming in late, and it's uncharacteristic day. But it was interesting, even for me. I know you. I've heard these things before, but just to hear the way that you go through that process of, here's all these different tasks. This is what this task costs. This is how much time it takes. This is how much I like doing it and don't do it. I mean, I want to sit here and pull out my pad and start writing out my lists right now. And what more do I need to delegate? And it was even an eye opener for me. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm glad to share. And yeah, if anybody has questions, I'll be on the app. And yeah, thank you.
All right, so just in wrapping things up, again, this is our Lifeonaire Global Connect call. If you have any other questions, Hussain does participate inside of the app. You can post your questions in there. We'd love to continue this conversation. I also just want to put a plug out there for just a reminder. There is a Lifeonaire event coming up in less than a month. It's going to be in Raleigh, North Carolina. If you need to fine-tune your vision, or if you've never been to an event yet, I want to encourage you to go. If you are a Titanium member and you know people who should be at an event, as your guest, they can go to these events. You can sponsor them and get them to one of the events. And our goal, as most of you know, is really to just spread that Lifeonaire message, help change lives. The event is coming up February 3rd in Raleigh, North Carolina. And so I want to encourage as many of you who can get there, get the word out, help us get the word out, and let's change some lives. Hussain, it looks cold there. I can see sort of the wind blowing in the background.
Yeah.
And I was there just 4 or 5 days ago, and the below zero, I'm glad to be back in Tennessee right now.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you. Have a blessed day. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Hussain.
Yeah, thank you. Take care.